Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Christopher, and I saw Brittany for the last time 3 meters ahead of me on the trail before she simply disappeared. It was October 15th, 2015, my third week as a forest ranger at Pine Ridge National Forest. The autumn air carried that crisp bite that should have felt refreshing, but instead made my skin crawl with something I couldn't name yet. I was conducting my first solo patrol, desperate to prove to my supervisor that the academy hadn't wasted their time on me. Brittany Morrison, 22, blonde, wearing a bright red hiking jacket that should have made her impossible to lose sight of. She'd approached me at the trailhead around 2 p.m., asking about the difficulty level of the Whisper Creek Trail. Standard stuff. I'd given her my best professional ranger voice, the one I'd practiced in the mirror, explaining the moderate terrain and reminding her to stay on marked paths. "Thank you so much," she'd said, her smile genuine and warm. "It's nice to see someone so young working to protect these beautiful places." That compliment had made my chest swell with pride. Finally, someone who saw me as a real ranger, not just a kid playing dress-up in government khakis. I'd offered to escort her to the first mile marker. Purely professional, I told myself, though part of me wanted to extend the conversation. She'd accepted, and we'd walked together down the pine needle-carpeted trail, talking about her job as a veterinary student, her love of nature photography. The forest felt different that afternoon. The usual chorus of birds seemed muted, like someone had turned down nature's volume. Even the wind through the pines sounded wrong, hollow. But I was too focused on not tripping over roots or saying something stupid to pay attention to my instincts. We'd just passed the old lightning-struck oak, a landmark I'd memorized during training, when I bent down to retie my boot. Standard issue rangers, still stiff and giving me blisters. When I straightened up, maybe 10 seconds later, Brittany was gone. Not walked ahead, not stepped off trail. Gone. "Brittany," I called out, my voice cracking slightly. The sound died in the unnatural stillness. I ran ahead, checking behind trees, calling her name until my throat was raw. Her red jacket should have been visible for hundreds of yards in any direction. The trail was straight, no curves or obstacles to block my view. I checked my watch, 3:17 p.m. I'd looked down for maybe 8 seconds. People don't just vanish. I radioed dispatch with shaking hands. "Unit 23 to base, I have a missing hiker on Whisper Creek Trail, mile marker 1. "Copy that, Unit 23. "Can you describe the circumstances?" How could I explain that I'd lost a person like misplacing car keys? Female, early 20s, red jacket, was hiking alone. Last seen, I swallowed hard. Last seen 3 minutes ago. The search began immediately. Within an hour, the trail swarmed with senior rangers, dogs, even a helicopter. They found nothing. No tracks leaving the trail, no torn fabric caught on branches, no scent for the dogs to follow. It was like Brittany Morrison had been erased from existence. That was 6 hours ago. Now at 9:23 p.m. I'm walking that same stretch of trail with a flashlight that keeps flickering despite fresh batteries. The official search was called off until morning, but I couldn't leave. Wouldn't leave. My supervisor, Ranger Martinez, had ordered me to go home, get some rest. "Not your fault, kid," he'd said, but I caught the doubt in his eyes. The unspoken question, how do you lose someone in broad daylight? I'd nodded, played the part of the obedient rookie, then snuck back onto the trail as soon as the parking lot cleared. My Honda Civic sat alone under the single working streetlight, looking as abandoned as I felt. The forest at night is a different creature entirely. Every shadow could be hiding something. Every creak of settling wood sounds like footsteps. My flashlight beam cuts through the darkness, but somehow makes everything beyond its reach seem darker, more menacing. I'm retracing our exact route, hoping to spot something the official search missed. My GPS shows I'm approaching the lightning oak where I'd bent to tie my boot. where I'd failed in the most basic task of keeping someone safe. The temperature drops suddenly, and my breath fogs in the flashlight beam. October in Oregon can be unpredictable, but this feels different. Colder, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. That's when I see her, a figure in white standing just beyond the reach of my flashlight. My heart hammers against my ribs as I raise the beam higher, and the figure disappears. Hello? My voice echoes back to me, smaller and more frightened than I intended. Is someone there? Silence. Then, carried on a breeze that doesn't touch the trees around me, I hear it. Christopher. My name, spoken in a voice I don't recognize. Female, hollow, like someone calling from the bottom of a well. I sweep the flashlight in wide arcs, hands trembling. Nothing. But the temperature keeps dropping, and now I can see my breath in thick puffs. The smell hits me next, something sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a vase. Who's there? I call out, trying to sound authoritative. Ranger training. Project Confidence. This is a restricted area after dark. The laughter that answers makes my blood freeze. It's not quite human, too musical, too perfect. It echoes from everywhere and nowhere surrounding me. Christopher, you let her die. What? No, I spin around, flashlight beam dancing wildly. Who are you? Where's Brittany? But I know I'm alone. The rational part of my brain, the part trained in search and rescue protocols, knows I should leave. Report this to Martinez. Let the experienced rangers handle whatever psychological breakdown I'm obviously having, but the guilt is stronger than logic. If someone knows what happened to Brittany, I have to find out. I push forward down the trail, following the path we'd taken that afternoon. Every few steps I catch glimpses of white in my peripheral vision, but when I turn to look directly, nothing's there. My radio crackles with static, making me jump. I adjust the frequency, trying to raise base camp, but only get more static. Strange. I had perfect reception earlier. Unit 23 to base, I try anyway. Unit 23 requesting backup at Whisper Creek Trail. The static clears for just a moment and a voice comes through. Christopher, why didn't you save me? It's Brittany's voice. I'm sure of it. The same warm tone she'd used to thank me earlier, now twisted with accusation and pain. Brittany? Brittany, where are you? I'm running now, flashlight beam bouncing crazily as I crash through undergrowth. I'm coming, I'm going to find you! Branches tear at my uniform, roots try to trip me, but I keep going. The voice seems to come from just ahead, always just ahead, leading me deeper into the forest. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Christopher's situation? Comment below. The trail disappears beneath me sometime around 10 p.m., but I don't notice until I'm scrambling up a steep incline that definitely wasn't on any of the maps I'd memorized. My GPS shows only static now, the screen flickering between readings that make no sense. Brittany! I shout into the darkness. My throat is raw, voice barely carrying in the thick air that tastes increasingly of decay. That's when I see the dress. White fabric, torn and stained, hanging from a low branch about 20 feet ahead. My heart pounds as I approach, flashlight beam steady for the first time in an hour. It's not Brittany's red hiking jacket. It's a dress. An old-fashioned white dress with long sleeves and a high collar. The kind you'd see in historical photos. The fabric is stained with something dark that might be mud or might be something worse. Oh God, I whisper, reaching for my radio again. Unit 23 to any available units. I've found evidence. You found nothing, Christopher. I spin around and she's standing right behind me. A woman in a white dress identical to the one hanging from the branch. But this one is worse, much worse. The fabric clings to a frame too thin, too angular. Her face is pale as moonlight, beautiful in a way that makes my stomach churn. Her eyes are completely black, not brown or dark blue, but black like looking into a deep well at midnight. And the dress. God, The dress is soaked in blood from the waist down, still wet and dripping onto the pine needles at her feet. "You're not real," I stammer, backing away. "I'm having a breakdown. Stress. First week on the job, I lost someone, and now I'm seeing things." She tilts her head, and when she smiles, her teeth are too white, too sharp. "Poor little ranger boy," she says, and her voice is like cold fingers running down my spine. "So new, so eager to please, so desperate to prove you're worthy of that uniform." "Where's Brittany?" I manage to ask. "What did you do with her?" "Brittany?" The woman in white laughs, that same musical sound from earlier. "Sweet Brittany is with me now, just like you'll be with me soon." She takes a step closer, and I notice she doesn't make footprints in the soft earth. Her bare feet hover just above the ground, and where her blood-soaked dress brushes against ferns and bushes, they wither and turn black. "I've been waiting so long for a new friend," she continues, circling me now like a predator. "The last ranger who found me was such poor company. He screamed for days before he finally broke." "The last ranger?" My training kicks in despite the terror. "When? Who?" "Oh, you wouldn't know him. Thomas Garrett disappeared in 1987. They never found his body either." Her smile widens. "He's still here, you know. Still running through these trees, trying to find his way home. Still calling for help on that old radio of his." The static on my radio suddenly makes sense. Those voices I couldn't quite make out. "You're lying," I say, but my voice lacks conviction. "Am I?" She's directly in front of me now, close enough that I should feel her breath on my face, but there's nothing. Just that overwhelming smell of rotting flowers. "Tell me, Christopher, what do you think happened to Brittany?" "Really happened?" Images flash through my mind against my will. Brittany's trusting smile, her warm laugh as we talked about her veterinary studies, the way she'd looked at me like I was a real ranger, someone who could protect her. I looked away for 8 seconds, I whisper. 8 seconds, she repeats mockingly. 8 seconds to fail at the most basic part of your job. 8 seconds to let an innocent girl disappear forever. It wasn't my fault, wasn't it? She leans in closer, and I can see that the black stains on her dress aren't blood at all, but something that moves and writhes. You were supposed to protect her, Christopher. That's what rangers do, isn't it? Protect people in the wilderness? My legs give out and I collapse to my knees in the pine needles. She's right. It was my job, and I failed. Brittany trusted me, and I let her vanish because I was too focused on impressing her, too concerned with proving I belonged. There's my good boy, the woman in white coos, running cold fingers through my hair. Now you understand. You killed her just as surely as if you'd pushed her off a cliff. Please, I sobbed, just tell me where she is. Let me fix this. Oh, you can fix this, Christopher. You can join her. Join us. No more guilt, no more shame, no more pretending to be something you're not. She gestures to the forest around us, and for the first time, I notice we're not alone. Figures move between the trees, translucent, shifting, but unmistakably human. Men and women in various states of decay and despair, all wearing the clothes they died in. My collection, she says proudly. Everyone who's ever wandered too far into my forest. Everyone who needed saving. I spot him then, a figure in an older ranger uniform, the kind they wore in the 80s. His face is gaunt, eyes hollow, but the name tape on his chest clearly reads Garrett. He looks at me with such profound sadness that I want to look away, but I can't. His mouth moves, but no sound comes out. Then I realize he's mouthing words. Run. Thomas tried to warn people too. The woman in white says casually. Posted signs, filed reports about unusual incidents on this trail. His supervisor thought he was having a nervous breakdown, ordered psychological evaluation. Funny how history repeats itself. She's right. In a few hours, Martinez will find my abandoned car in the parking lot. They'll search for me, find nothing, and eventually assume I had some kind of breakdown over losing Brittany. Another rookie who couldn't handle the pressure. Unless She continues, reading my thoughts. You'd prefer a different story. You could walk out of here, Christopher. Go home to your little apartment, pretend none of this happened. Let everyone think Brittany just wandered off and got lost. Happens all the time in national forests. What's the catch? No catch, just a simple trade. Her smile shows those two sharp teeth again. You give me someone else instead. Someone who trusts you. Someone who would follow you into the woods. My phone buzzes with a text message, somehow getting signal where my radio can't. It's from my girlfriend, Sarah. How was your first solo patrol? Can't wait to hear about it. Still on for that hike this weekend? The woman in white reads over my shoulder, her cold breath making me shiver. Sarah seems lovely, and she trusts you, doesn't she? Thinks you're her big, strong ranger boyfriend who can keep her safe in the scary woods. No. The word comes out stronger than I expected. I won't trade Sarah for myself, and I won't abandon Brittany. Her expression shifts, beauty twisting into something inhuman and furious. Then you'll join them both. She lunges at me with fingers that have become claws, dress billowing around her like smoke. I roll to the side, ranger training finally kicking in over terror, and scramble to my feet. You can't run from me forever, Christopher, she shrieks, her voice now like breaking glass. I know these woods better than you ever will. I am these woods. I run anyway, crashing through undergrowth, following what I hope is still the direction of the trail. Behind me I can hear her pursuit. Not footsteps, but the sound of wind through dead leaves growing closer. My flashlight dies just as I stumble into a small clearing I don't recognize. The moon provides just enough light to see that I'm surrounded by standing stones arranged in a rough circle. They're not natural, too regular, too perfectly placed. In the center of the circle I see her. Brittany. She's sitting with her back against a large stone, still wearing her red hiking jacket. Her eyes are open but unfocused, staring at nothing. She's breathing but barely, each breath a struggle. Brittany! I rush toward her, but stop short when I see the thin silver cord wrapped around her throat, extending up into the darkness above us. It pulses with a faint light, and I realize it's not a physical cord at all, but something else. Something that connects her to the shadows between the stones. She's not dead, Christopher, the woman in white says, materializing at the edge of the circle. Not yet, but she's mine now. Has been since the moment you failed to protect her. Let her go, I demand, though my voice shakes. Take me instead. I don't want you instead. She steps into the circle and the stones begin to glow with the same silver light as the cord around Brittany's neck. I want you both. I want you to watch her fade away, knowing it's your fault. I want you to carry that guilt forever here with me. There has to be another way. There is. Her voice becomes almost kind again. Kill her yourself. End her suffering quickly, and I'll let you go home. You can tell everyone she had an accident. Fell from a cliff, maybe. Animal attack. No one will question a ranger's report. I look at Brittany, so young and innocent, breathing those labored breaths. I think about my knife, regulation issue, sharp enough to make it quick and painless. I think about going home, having a normal life, never speaking of this night again. No, I say finally. I won't do it. Then you're both mine. The woman in white raises her hands, and more silver cords begin to form in the air around me. But something else happens. The stones around us begin to crack, light bleeding from the fissures. Thomas Garrett steps into the circle. The ghostly ranger looks more solid now, more real. Behind him come others, all the spirits I'd seen in the forest, no longer translucent but glowing with their own inner light. She's held us here for decades, Thomas says, and his voice carries clearly now. Fed on our guilt, our regret, our failure. But you broke the pattern, son. How? You chose to save someone else instead of yourself. That's what breaks her power. That's what sets us free. The woman in white screams, a sound like tearing metal, as the spirits surround her. The silver cord around Brittany's neck begins to dissolve. This isn't over, the woman shrieks as the spirits pull her toward some distant darkness I can't see. She's still mine. You still failed. Maybe, Thomas says, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. But failure ain't forever if you learn from it. The spirits fade with the first light of dawn, taking the woman in white with them. The stone circle crumbles into ordinary rocks and fallen logs. Brittany takes a deep, shuddering breath and opens her eyes. "Christopher," she says weakly. "What happened?" "I was following the trail, and then animal attack," I tell her, helping her to her feet. "You hit your head, been unconscious all night. We need to get you to a hospital." She nods, accepting the lie because it makes more sense than the truth. As we make our way back toward what I hope is the trail, she looks at me with something like admiration. "Thank you," she says. "You saved my life." I want to tell her she's wrong, that I failed her completely, that I'm not the hero she thinks I am. But maybe that's the lesson, that being a real ranger isn't about never failing. It's about what you do after you fail. "Just doing my job," I tell her. Later, after the ambulance has taken Brittany to the hospital for observation, after I've filed my report about the animal attack and overnight search, I sit in my car in the empty parking lot and think about Thomas Garrett. According to the files Martinez shows me, Ranger Garrett was reported missing in October 1987. His car was found in this same parking lot. The official report concluded he suffered a psychological breakdown and wandered off into the wilderness. Happens more than you'd think, Martinez tells me. The isolation, the pressure, especially for new rangers. That's why we have the buddy system now. That's why you should have waited for backup last night instead of going back out alone. He's right, of course. I violated protocol, put myself and potentially others at risk, but I also saved Brittany's life. Am I going to be disciplined? I ask. Disciplined? Martinez laughs. Kid, you found a missing person who'd been unconscious in the woods for 8 hours. The family's calling you a hero. The superintendent wants to commend you for dedication above and beyond the call of duty. As I drive home, I think about heroes and failure, about the thin line between success and disaster. I think about Brittany, safe in a hospital bed, and Sarah, waiting for me to call and tell her about my first real case. I also think about the woman in white, and wonder if she's really gone or just waiting for the next guilt-ridden soul to wander into her web. But mostly, I think about Thomas Garrett, and all the other spirits who chose to help instead of harm, who found redemption in sacrifice instead of drowning in their failures. Maybe that's what being a ranger really means. Not never failing, but learning how to save others even when you couldn't save yourself. 3 months later, I'm training a new rookie ranger named Jessica. As we walk the Whisper Creek Trail together, I point out the lightning-struck oak, the stream crossings, all the landmarks she needs to memorize. What's the most important thing to remember? I ask her. Never leave your partner, she recites from the manual. That's right. But there's something else. I stop at the spot where I lost Brittany, where I first encountered the woman in white. Sometimes you'll fail. Sometimes you'll make mistakes that put people in danger. When that happens, you don't give up, you don't make excuses, you find a way to make it right. Jessica nods seriously, writing in her notebook. She doesn't ask why I'm telling her this, doesn't question the haunted look I know comes into my eyes whenever we pass this section of trail. That night, I call Brittany. We've stayed in touch since the incident. She sends me photos from her veterinary classes. I update her on forest conditions for her weekend hikes. Neither of us talks about that night, about the hours she can't remember. How are you doing, Christopher? She asks. You sound tired. Just training a new ranger reminded me of my first few weeks on the job. You mean when you saved my life? Something like that. After I hang up, I sit on my apartment balcony and look out at the dark outline of Pine Ridge National Forest. Somewhere in those trees, the woman in white might still be waiting. Somewhere else, other supernatural predators might be hunting for guilty souls to torment. But also, somewhere in those trees, the spirits of rangers like Thomas Garrett stand watch, ready to help when someone chooses redemption over despair. I think that's a fair trade. My name is Christopher, and I'm a forest ranger. I've failed to save people, and I've succeeded in saving people. I've faced supernatural evil and found the strength to choose others over myself. And tomorrow, I'll wake up and do it again. Because that's what Rangers do. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror and comment your theory about what really happened to Brittany during those missing hours. I read every single one. My name is Steven, and I saw Ashley for the last time 3 meters ahead of me on the trail before. She simply disappeared. Not like she ducked behind a tree or took a wrong turn. I mean, she was there, hiking boots crunching on pine needles, navy backpack bobbing with each step, blonde ponytail swaying, and then she wasn't. Like someone had hit the delete key on reality itself. That was 6 hours ago. My Garmin E-Trex GPS still shows her last coordinates. 37 to Girl 44 12 4, N 119 to 35 28.7 W. Same spot I've been standing in for the past 20 minutes, checking and rechecking the display. The numbers don't change, but something's wrong with this place. The air tastes metallic, like I'm sucking on old pennies. The pine scent that should be sharp and clean has gone sour, almost rotten. My radio crackles to life. Unit 7, what's your 20? I key the mic with trembling fingers. Unit 7 to base. Still at coordinates 37 to 44 12, 119 to 35 28. No sign of the missing hiker. Copy that, Steven. How long you been at that position? I glance at my watch. 2:47 p.m. That can't be right. I've been here way longer than that. About 30 minutes, dispatch. Roger. Continue grid search pattern. Rangers Morrison and Chen are working Sector 7 Alpha. My blood turns to ice water. Did you say Morrison? That's a negative, Unit 7. I said Martinez and Chen. But I heard Morrison clear as day. Ranger Bill Morrison died in 1987 in a service accident somewhere on this trail system. I'd read his file during my training. Fell into a ravine during a night search, body never recovered. Ancient history. So why did I hear his name? I pocket the radio and check my iPhone. 2 bars, which is decent for Yosemite backcountry. The last text from my wife Sarah sits unread. How's the search going? Emma wants to know if you'll make it to her soccer game at 6. My throat tightens. Emma's 8 years old and thinks her dad can find anyone, solve anything. She drew me a picture last week, a stick figure in a ranger hat standing next to a smiling hiker she'd labeled, Daddy Saves the Day. It's folded in my wallet right now, edges already worn from nervous handling. I was supposed to save Ashley. She was just doing research for her college thesis on local folklore, something about trails that lead nowhere. Cute blonde kid from UC Berkeley, reminded me of Emma in 20 years. Smart as hell, asked a million questions about the trail system, took notes in this beat-up composition book. The trees around me are all wrong. I've been working Yosemite for 3 years, know every Douglas fir and granite outcrop in this sector. But these trees, I swear I've passed that lightning-struck pine with the eagle nest 4 times now. Same broken branch angle, same moss pattern on the north side. My GPS shows I haven't moved. I start walking again, forcing one boot in front of the other. The trail here is standard Pacific Crest maintenance, 3 feet wide, well marked with those brown wooden posts every quarter mile. Trail marker 247 comes into view ahead, exactly where it should be. Except I passed marker 247 an hour ago. My hands are shaking as I pull out my phone and take a picture of the marker. When I check the image, the numbers are blurred, unreadable. I take another shot. Same thing. The camera works fine on everything else. The trees, the rocks, my own boots. But every photo of the trail markers comes out distorted. What the fuck is going on here? I whisper to myself, then immediately feel guilty. Sarah hates it when I swear, says Emma picks up everything. A sound drifts through the forest, faint but distinct. Crying, a woman crying. Ashley. I break into a run, crashing through undergrowth, branches whipping at my face. The crying gets louder, more desperate. It's coming from deeper in the woods, off trail. Every instinct screams not to leave the marked path, but that's Ashley's voice. I'm sure of it. The crying stops. I stand in a small clearing I've never seen before, chest heaving, surrounded by unfamiliar rock formations. My GPS is spinning like a compass near a magnet. Can't get a lock on anything. The screen flickers between impossible coordinates, some showing me in Nevada, others placing me in the Pacific Ocean. "Ashley!" I shout. "Ashley, can you hear me?" My voice echoes back wrong like it's coming from underground. The forest has gone completely silent. No bird calls, no wind through the branches, no insect buzz. Even my own breathing sounds muffled. I key my radio. "Unit 7 to base. I'm not sure of my position. GPS is malfunctioning. I heard the missing hiker calling for help but lost the signal." Static. "Base, do you copy?" More static. Then a voice breaks through, but it's not dispatch. It's a man, older, with a gravelly smoker's rasp. "Unit 7, this is Ranger Morrison. What's your 20? My finger freezes on the transmit button. Bill Morrison has been dead for 31 years. "Unit 7, respond. This is Morrison. I'm working a missing person case, young female hiker. Last seen on Valley Loop Trail, Sector 7 Charlie. Need your assistance." The radio crackles with interference, then goes dead. Not even static now. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Steven's situation? Comment below. I'm hyperventilating. My scientific mind, the same analytical brain that earned me a forestry degree and made me the nerd ranger my colleagues barely tolerate, is desperately trying to rationalize this. Radio interference, GPS satellite issues, altitude sickness causing auditory hallucinations. But deep down, I know I'm lying to myself. I find the trail again, or what I think is the trail. The wooden posts look identical to the standard Park Service markers, but the numbers keep changing. 247, 251, 247 again, then 198, which shouldn't exist in this sector. The sun hasn't moved since I've been out here, still hanging at the same angle, casting the same shadows. My watch still reads 2:47 p.m., the second hand frozen between 23 and 24. I tap the crystal. Nothing. My phone shows 2:47 too. Same with the timestamp on my radio. Time has stopped. I'm walking in circles. The same section of trail over and over. That lightning-struck pine, that granite boulder shaped like a crouching bear, that fallen log Ashley stepped over right before she disappeared. I've counted my steps, exactly 847 paces between the pine and the boulder every single time. This isn't possible. Trails don't loop back on themselves. Geography doesn't lie. Physics doesn't break down just because you're scared and tired and losing your goddamn mind. But Ashley is still missing, and I'm the only one who saw what happened. I'm the only one who can find her. The radio crackles again. Morrison's voice, clearer this time. "Unit 7, I need you to follow the trail markers in reverse order. Start with 251 and work backward. That's how you find them, son. That's how you save them." "You're dead," I whisper into the radio. "You died in 1987. A pause. Then, "Did I? Are you sure about that, Stephen? Are you sure about anything anymore?" He knows my name. The trail marker ahead reads 251. If I follow Morrison's advice and go backward, but that doesn't make sense. You always search in a grid pattern. Systematic sweeps maintain your bearing. Basic Search and Rescue 101. Unless the rules don't apply here. Unless this isn't a normal place. I start walking toward marker 250, fighting every instinct telling me to maintain proper search protocols. My boots feel like they're made of lead. Each step requires conscious effort, like I'm walking through thick mud instead of a well-maintained trail. The forest is watching me. I can feel it, a presence behind every tree, in every shadow. My peripheral vision keeps catching movement that disappears when I turn to look. Shapes that might be Ashley, or Morrison, or something else entirely. Marker 249, 248, 247. The numbers are going down, but I'm walking uphill. That's impossible. If I'm following the trail backward, I should be descending toward the valley floor. Instead, the path keeps climbing, winding through terrain that can't exist according to the topographic maps in my head. My phone buzzes. A text from Sarah. "Stephen? You missed Emma's game. She's asking where Daddy is. Please call. The timestamp shows 8:47 p.m. 4 hours later than my frozen watch. But look at the sky. Still the same pale afternoon light. Sun in the exact same position. I try calling Sarah, but the call won't connect. No signal bars now, even though I had 2 bars at this same spot earlier. Or what I thought was this same spot. Marker 246 appears ahead, but there's something wrong with it. The wood looks newer, like it was just installed. And carved below the numbers, almost too faint to read. W. Morrison, 1987, forever. My legs give out. I collapse onto a fallen log, head in my hands, trying to process what I'm seeing. The wood of the trail marker. It's not regulation Park Service issue. It's handmade, rough-hewn like someone carved it with a knife. Like someone had a lot of time on their hands. 31 years, maybe. You're starting to understand, Morrison's voice says, but not through the radio this time. He's standing right behind me. I spin around. Nothing. Empty forest. The trail doesn't end, Stephen. It never ends. That's the secret they don't tell you in ranger training. Some places are older than the maps, older than the service, older than the idea that we can control nature by drawing lines and putting up signs. His voice seems to come from the trees themselves, from the ground beneath my feet. Ashley found the trail. Same as others before her, same as you're going to. Where is she? I stand up, fists clenched. What did you do with her? I didn't do anything, son. The trail takes what it wants. I'm just the guide. Been walking this same path since 1987, helping people find their way to where they need to be. A scream pierces the forest silence. Ashley's voice, terrified and desperate, somewhere ahead on the trail. I run toward the sound, crashing through underbrush, ignoring Morrison's laughter echoing behind me. The trail twists and turns through impossible geography, climbing ridges that shouldn't exist, crossing streams I've never seen on any map. Marker 245, 244, 243. Each number brings Ashley's screams closer. She's calling my name now, begging for help. The scientific part of my brain notes that sound doesn't carry that clearly through dense forest, that her voice seems to come from multiple directions at once. But the human part, the part that promised Emma I'd always save the day, doesn't care about acoustics. I burst into another clearing and freeze. Ashley is there, standing with her back to me, facing a trail marker I can't quite see the number on. She's perfectly still, arms at her sides, head tilted at an odd angle like she's listening to something. Ashley, I call softly. She doesn't move. I step closer. Ashley, it's Stephen, the ranger who was with you earlier. Are you hurt? Still no movement, not even breathing that I can detect. When I'm close enough to touch her shoulder, I finally see what she's looking at. The trail marker reads, Infinity. Below that, carved into the wood in the same rough style as Morrison's marker. End of the line. Ashley turns around. Her face is my face. Not similar, not resembling. Identical. My own features staring back at me from Ashley's body. My own eyes filled with the same growing madness I feel creeping through my thoughts. Welcome to the trail, Stephen, she says in my voice. Population, everyone who's ever been lost. The world tilts sideways. I stagger backward, bile rising in my throat. This isn't real. Can't be real. Hallucinations brought on by stress, dehydration, altitude sickness. There's a rational explanation for everything I'm seeing. But Ashley with my face smiles, and I recognize that smile. It's the same one Emma gives me when she's figured out something I haven't, when she knows a secret I don't. You want to know the truth, Daddy? Ashley me asks. You want to know what really happens on the trail that never ends? The forest spins around me. Trees blur together into a kaleidoscope of green and brown. The ground feels soft, unstable, like I'm standing on quicksand. You become part of it, Ashley me continues. Everyone who gets lost here becomes part of the trail. We're all here, Stephen. All the hikers who disappeared over the years. All the rangers who came looking for them. All the search teams who got too deep and couldn't find their way back. She gestures around the clearing, and now I can see them. Dozens of figures standing among the trees, all perfectly still. All wearing faces I recognize from missing person reports. The Berkeley student from 2003. The elderly couple from Portland in 2011. The Boy Scout troop that vanished during a winter camping trip. All of them wearing their own faces on other people's bodies like a deck of cards that's been shuffled by a madman. Morrison figured it out first, Ashley Me says. Back in '87, he realized the trail was alive, that it needed sustenance. So he made a deal. Feed it new lost souls and he gets to be the guide instead of just another victim. My radio crackles. Unit 7, you're getting close now. Just a little further and you'll understand everything. I have to get out of here, I whisper, backing away from the infinity marker. I have to get back to Emma, to Sarah. I promised. You promised you'd save the day, Ashley Me says. And you will. Just not the way you thought. The trail behind me, the way I came, is gone. Nothing but dense forest in every direction, trees so thick you couldn't walk between them. The only way forward is past the infinity marker, deeper into whatever lies beyond. The trail never ends, Stephen. That's the beauty of it. You'll never be late for dinner again. Never miss another soccer game. Never have to explain why you couldn't find the lost hiker. Time doesn't move here. Nothing changes. Nothing dies. My phone buzzes. Another text from Sarah. Stephen, I'm scared. It's been 2 days since you left. Please come home. Emma keeps asking if you got lost too. 2 days? That's impossible. I've only been out here for... I check my watch. Still 2:47 p.m. Same as it's been since I started following the trail backward. But if Sarah says it's been 2 days... Time moves differently here, Ashley Me explains, reading my confusion. Minutes here, hours out there. Hours here, years out there. Morrison's been walking this trail for 31 years, but for him it's only been an afternoon. The figures among the trees start moving closer, and I can see they're all rangers. Different eras of uniforms, different decades of equipment, but all rangers. All people who came looking for someone and became lost themselves. We tried to warn people, one of them says, a woman in a 1970s-era uniform. Left signs, posted warnings, but they don't listen. People never listen. Because people don't believe, adds a man with a 1990s radio setup. They think they understand the wilderness, think they can map it and measure it and make it safe. But some places don't want to be safe, Morrison's voice says, and now I can see him too, standing by the infinity marker. He looks exactly like his personnel photo from 1987, mid-30s, mustache, that same confident ranger smile that hides deeper knowledge. Some places are hungry. The ground beneath my feet starts to shift and move, like I'm standing on the back of some enormous sleeping animal. The trail markers around the clearing change as I watch, numbers spinning like slot machine wheels, settling on coordinates that don't exist on any earthly map. You have a choice, Stephen, Morrison says. Walk past the marker and join us. Become part of the trail. Help us guide the lost ones. Or what? He smiles, and it's not a nice expression. Or try to find your way back. Follow the markers in the right direction this time. See if you can beat the maze. And if I make it out? Then you go home to your wife and daughter, and you never speak of this place. You file a report saying Ashley fell into a ravine and her body was never recovered. Standard wilderness fatality. Case closed. But she's not dead. No, Morrison agrees. She's not. None of us are dead, Stephen. We're just elsewhere. Somewhen. The trail takes care of us. Ashley Me steps closer and I can smell her or me or whatever she is. She smells like pine needles and fear sweat and something else. Something chemical and wrong. The trail needs new blood, Stephen. New perspectives. Your analytical mind would be valuable here. You could help us understand the patterns, figure out the mathematics of infinite space. My radio crackles again, but now it's dispatch. All units, be advised. Ranger Stevens has been missing for 48 hours. Last known position Valley Loop Trail, Sector 7 Charlie. Search teams are being organized. 48 hours. But I've only been gone since morning, haven't I? Choose quickly, Morrison says. The longer you stay, the harder it becomes to leave. The trail has roots, Stephen. It grows into you. I look at my hands. The fingernails are longer than they should be, and there's moss growing in the creases of my palms. Green and soft, like the moss that grows on the north side of trees. The infinity marker pulses with its own light now, casting shadows that move independently of any light source. Behind it, the trail continues into darkness so complete it seems solid, like walking into black paint. My phone buzzes constantly now. Text after text from Sarah, from my supervisor, from Emma's school asking where I am. The timestamps jump around randomly. Yesterday, next week, 6 months ago, 30 years in the future. I won't join you, I say finally. I'm going home. Morrison nods sadly. I thought you might say that. The smart ones usually do. He points past me, and I turn to see a single trail marker. 247. The same number where this all started. The path behind it leads into forest that looks normal, manageable, finite. Follow the markers in order this time, Morrison says. 248, 249, 250, and so on. Don't deviate. Don't look back. Don't stop until you reach the trailhead. What about Ashley? Ashley made her choice when she started researching trails that lead nowhere. She knew what she was looking for, Stephen. Some people come here on purpose. I start walking toward marker 247, but Ashley Me calls after me. Tell Emma her daddy saved the day after all. I don't look back. The trail from 247 to 248 feels normal. Real dirt, real rocks, real trees that stay in the same place when I'm not looking at them. My watch starts ticking again. 248, 249, 250. My GPS slowly locks onto actual coordinates that match the maps in my head. 248 to 249. The forest sounds return, birds calling, wind in the branches, the distant noise of traffic from the valley road. Normal sounds, human sounds, 249 to 250. My radio crackles with genuine dispatch chatter. Search Team Alpha, report your position. Team Bravo checking Sector 12. K9 unit requesting permission to expand search grid. They're looking for me. 250 to 251. I can smell the parking lot now. Exhaust fumes and hot asphalt and the artificial pine scent of car air fresheners. Civilization. Reality. The world where physics works and time moves forward and people don't wear each other's faces. At marker 252, I see the trailhead. Cars in the parking lot, search teams organizing their gear, my supervisor pacing next to the command trailer with a phone pressed to his ear. I stumble out of the forest and immediately get swarmed by paramedics, questioned by supervisors, debriefed by search coordinators. They say I've been missing for 2 days. They say I was found 3 miles from where I disappeared, walking in circles, mumbling about trail markers. They say there was no Ashley, no missing college student, no research thesis about folklore, no UC Berkeley record of anyone by that name. The family that reported her missing doesn't exist. The emergency call that started my search was never made, but I remember her. Remember her blonde ponytail bobbing ahead of me on the trail. Remember her composition book full of notes about local legends. Remember her voice crying for help in the forest. Remember her wearing my face. The doctors say I suffered from severe dehydration and altitude sickness. Acute stress reaction. Possible psychotic break brought on by isolation and job pressure. They recommend counseling, medication, time off. I don't tell them about Morrison. Don't mention the trail that never ends or the rangers who went looking and never came back. I file my report exactly as instructed. Ashley, no last name found, was a hallucination brought on by medical distress. No missing person case. No body to recover. Case closed. Sarah picks me up from the hospital. She's been crying. I can tell from her puffy eyes and the way she grips my hand like she's afraid I'll disappear again. Emma made me a get-well card with a drawing of our family standing in front of our house, all holding hands, all smiling. "Daddy's home," she wrote in purple crayon. But I'm not home, not really. Because every night when I close my eyes, I'm back on that trail, walking between markers that change their numbers when I'm not looking, hearing Morrison's voice on my radio, offering guidance to the lost, seeing Ashley's face, my face, smiling at me from the shadows. And sometimes on particularly quiet nights, I hear my radio crackling from the bedroom dresser where I keep it. Messages that shouldn't be possible on a dead battery, from a frequency that doesn't exist. Unit 7, this is base. We have a new missing person case. Hiker failed to return from Valley Loop Trail. Last seen near marker 247, requesting immediate response. I don't answer. I've learned to ignore the calls, to bury the radio under pillows and blankets until the voice goes away. But Emma's getting older, and soon she'll be old enough for camping trips and hiking adventures. She already talks about becoming a ranger like Daddy, about saving lost people and being a hero. And I know that someday, no matter how carefully I plan our routes or how well I mark our path, we'll come across a trail marker that doesn't belong. A number that shouldn't exist. A path that leads nowhere and everywhere at once. Because the trail never ends. It just waits. And it's always hungry for new guides. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Ashley. I read every single one. The end. Or is it? What would you have chosen at the infinity marker? Would you have joined Morrison and Ashley or tried to find your way back like Steven? Let me know in the comments below. I love hearing your thoughts on these supernatural encounters. Next story preview, the campground that appears only on foggy nights. My name is William, and I should have forgotten the case of Emily, but something brought me back to that cursed forest. 3 months. 3 months since Emily Richardson, 22 years old, vanished without a trace from Pine Ridge National Forest. 3 months since I'd filed my final report, marked the case suspended pending new evidence, and tried to sleep at night without seeing her mother's tear-streaked face pleading with me to keep looking. I'd been a forest ranger for 18 years. Seen missing hikers turn up dehydrated but alive. Seen others we'd pull from ravines broken and cold. But Emily was different. There was no body, no blood trail, no logical explanation. Just her abandoned campsite at GPS coordinates 44.3106 degree N, 71.9992 4 degree W, with her sleeping bag still warm when we found it at dawn. My iPhone 8 buzzed against my chest at 5:47 a.m., pulling me from another nightmare about that empty campsite. The caller ID made my stomach clench. Richardson, Janet, Emily's mother. William. Her voice cracked through the speaker, raw from months of crying. I found something, in Emily's room, a diary entry from the week before she went camping. I sat up in bed, my wife Sarah mumbling sleepily beside me. "Mrs. Richardson, what did you find?" She wrote about a church, an old church deep in the forest. She said she felt called to find it. William, she drew a map. The metallic taste of fear flooded my mouth. In 18 years of ranger work, I'd never heard about any church in the deeper sections of Pine Ridge, but Emily's words echoed in my memory. "I feel like something's calling me into the woods, Mr. William. Like I need to find something important. I'll be right over," I whispered. An hour later, I sat in the Richardsons' kitchen, staring at Emily's diary. Her handwriting, normally neat and controlled, had become increasingly erratic in the final entries. September 15th, 2018. The dreams are getting stronger. There's a place in the forest, a sacred place that's been forgotten. I can see it so clearly. White walls covered in shadows, a bell tower reaching toward God. But something's wrong with it. Something happened there that turned the holy into something else. I have to find it. September 18th, 2018. I found old survey maps at the library. There was a church, St. Cornelius Chapel, built in 1847, but all records stop in 1966. What happened in 1966? Why did everyone forget it existed? September 20th, 2018. Last night I dreamed I was standing in front of the altar. The crucifix was upside down, and there were voices singing in Latin, but the words were wrong, twisted. When I woke up, my sheets were covered in dirt and pine needles. I've never sleepwalked before. My hands trembled as I studied Emily's hand-drawn map. She'd marked a route that led deep into the Pine Ridge wilderness, far beyond any established trail system. At the center of her map, she'd drawn a simple cross with the words, St. Cornelius, beneath it. Around the cross, she'd sketched what looked like trees, but the more I stared, the more they resembled reaching hands. She left for her camping trip the next morning, Mrs. Richardson whispered. That was the last time I saw her. I folded the diary entry into my shirt pocket, feeling the paper crinkle against my Kevlar vest. I'm going to find that church, Mrs. Richardson. I promise you. But as I drove my Forest Service pickup truck toward Pine Ridge at 7:30 a.m., something felt wrong. The familiar weight of my radio, the GPS unit mounted on my dashboard, my emergency beacon, all of it felt inadequate. Like I was heading into a territory where technology and training wouldn't matter. The October morning was crisp, with that particular smell of dying leaves and approaching winter. I parked at the Northside Trail access point and shouldered my pack, 48 pounds of standard search and rescue gear, plus Emily's map sealed in a plastic evidence bag. My boots, Danner Fort Lewis 10-inch leather, crunched on frost-covered pine needles as I checked my GPS coordinates one final time. According to Emily's map, St. Cornelius Chapel lay roughly 2 miles northeast of the main trail system, in an area marked on official Forest Service maps as unmaintained wilderness, entry discouraged. The first hour of hiking felt normal. I followed game trails and natural clearings, using my Silva compass to maintain northeast bearing. The morning sun filtered through the canopy, creating those familiar dancing shadows that had comforted me through thousands of hours in these woods. My radio crackled periodically with routine chatter from other rangers checking in with dispatch. Unit 7, this is base. What's your 20, William? The voice of Maria Santos, our dispatcher, came through clear and professional. I keyed the radio. Unit 7 to base, currently at coordinates 442987 degran, 71.9756 degran W, following up on the Richardson case. We'll check in hourly. Copy that, Unit 7. Be safe out there. But as I moved deeper into the wilderness, following Emily's increasingly detailed map markings, something began to change. The forest sounds, bird calls, rustling squirrels, the distant drumming of woodpeckers, gradually faded until I was walking in complete silence. My breath formed white puffs in air that seemed to be growing colder despite the climbing sun. At the 2-hour mark, I stopped to check my GPS. The display flickered erratically, showing my position jumping between coordinates that made no sense. According to the readings, I was simultaneously northwest and southeast of my starting point, an impossible contradiction that made my mouth go dry. That's when I smelled it. The faint scent of incense mixed with something else. Something organic and wrong, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. Emily's map showed I was close. I pushed through a dense thicket of mountain laurel, branches catching at my uniform and leaving thin scratches on my hands. My heart rate was climbing, not from exertion, but from a growing sense of being watched. Every ranger develops intuition about when something's tracking you. A subtle shift in forest sounds, the feeling of eyes assessing your movements. But this was different. This felt ancient and patient. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in William's situation? Comment below. When I finally broke through the undergrowth into a small clearing, I stopped breathing altogether. St. Cornelius Chapel stood exactly as Emily had drawn it. White clapboard walls stained with decades of neglect, a bell tower that seemed to lean at an impossible angle, and windows that reflected nothing but darkness despite the bright October sky. But what Emily's sketch hadn't captured was the wrongness that radiated from the structure like heat from a fire. The church's door hung open, revealing an interior so black it seemed to absorb light. Around the building, the trees grew in a perfect circle, their branches bent inward as if bowing toward the chapel. And carved into the trunk of every tree, hundreds of them in different hands, spanning decades, were dates. I approached the nearest tree with trembling legs. The carvings read, Matthew Cole, October 13th, 1966. Susan Bradley, March 8th, 1967. Reverend James Whitmore, December 25th, 1967. Lisa Morgan, July 4th, 1971. The dates continued chronologically, carved into tree after tree around the chapel's perimeter. The most recent carving made my knees buckle. Emily Richardson, September 21st, 2018. My radio crackled with static, then Maria's voice, distorted and distant. Unit 7. William, your signal, breaking up. Respond. I fumbled for the radio with numb fingers. Base, this is Unit 7. I found it. I found the church. Emily was here. But the only response was static that sounded almost like voices whispering in Latin. The incense smell grew stronger as I approached the chapel's open door, now mixed with an underlying odor of decay that made my stomach clench. My Streamlight Stinger LED flashlight felt pathetically small as I clicked it on and aimed the beam into the darkness. The interior was exactly as Emily had described in her dreams. Pews arranged in neat rows, an altar at the far end, and hanging above it, an ornate crucifix turned upside down. But what she hadn't mentioned were the photographs. Hundreds of photographs covered every surface, the walls, the altar, even the ceiling. As I stepped inside, my boots echoing on warped floorboards, I realized they were pictures of all the people whose names were carved on the trees outside. Decades of missing persons all smiling in their final photographs before they'd been drawn to this place. And there, placed reverently on the altar beneath the inverted cross, was a picture of Emily Richardson. She's beautiful, isn't she? I spun around, my hand instinctively reaching for the taser on my belt. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the unnatural darkness of the forest, was a figure I recognized from the photographs. Reverend James Whitmore, who should have been dead for over 50 years. But Whitmore looked exactly as he had in his 1967 photograph. A man in his 30s with kind eyes and a gentle smile, wearing clerical robes that seemed to shift and move in the stagnant air. You're William, he said, his voice carrying the warm authority of a lifetime spent delivering sermons. Emily told us you'd come. She speaks of you often. Where is she? My voice came out as a croak. Where's Emily? Whitmore stepped into the chapel, and I noticed his feet made no sound on the floorboards. She's here, William. She's always been here. Just as you will be. The photographs on the walls began to move, subtle at first, a blink here, a smile there, but then with increasing animation. The missing persons were turning their heads to look at me, their mouths opening and closing as if trying to speak. The church calls to those who are meant to serve, Whitmore continued, gliding closer. Emily felt it, just as you're feeling it now. The pull toward something greater than your small human existence. My rational mind screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The wrongness of this place was seeping into my bones, making my vision blur and my thoughts scatter. This was what had happened to Emily. The church didn't just trap people, it transformed them, made them part of whatever unholy congregation had taken root here. She's in the basement, Whitmore whispered, now close enough that I could smell the grave dirt on his breath. They're all in the basement, waiting for the final service to begin. Behind the altar, I noticed a door I hadn't seen before. It stood slightly ajar, revealing stone steps descending into absolute darkness. And from that darkness came the sound I'd been dreading, Emily's voice, calling my name. William? William, is that you? Please, I've been waiting so long. I can't remember how to leave. Every instinct told me not to go down those steps, but Emily was down there, alone and afraid, and I'd promised her mother I'd bring her home. I began walking toward the basement door, my flashlight beam dancing wildly with each trembling step. Reverend Whitmore smiled and stepped aside, his form becoming increasingly translucent. "Welcome to St. Cornelius Chapel, William," he said as I reached the door. "Service begins at midnight, and it never ends." The stone steps were slick with moisture and decades of decay. As I descended, the temperature dropped so rapidly that my breath formed thick clouds. The smell of incense was overwhelming now, mixed with something that reminded me of the morgue where I'd identified bodies in my early years as a ranger. "Emily?" I called into the darkness below. "I'm here. I'm coming to get you." Her voice drifted up from the depths. "Hurry, William, before the church decides you should stay too." At the bottom of the steps, my flashlight revealed a sight that would haunt me for whatever remained of my sanity. The basement was vast, far larger than the small chapel above could possibly contain. Stone columns stretched up into darkness, and between them, arranged in perfect rows like a grotesque parody of church pews, were bodies. But they weren't dead. They sat upright, their eyes open and aware, their mouths moving in silent prayer. Decades of missing persons preserved in some unholy communion, their faces bearing expressions of terrible understanding. And at the front of this nightmare congregation, still wearing the hiking clothes she'd disappeared in 3 months ago, sat Emily Richardson. She turned toward my light, and I saw that her eyes held the same awful knowledge as all the others. "William," she said, her voice carrying love and infinite sadness. "You came for me." I stumbled toward her between the rows of living corpses, my mind reeling. "Emily, we're getting out of here. Your mother's been worried sick. Everyone's been looking for you." But as I reached for her hand, she shook her head slowly. "I can't leave, William. None of us can. The church won't let us go until we've served our purpose." "What purpose? What does this place want?" Emily looked up at the stone ceiling, where I now noticed intricate carvings depicting scenes of ritual sacrifice and demonic worship. "St. Cornelius was never a real saint," she whispered. "The church was built as a beacon, a way for something ancient to anchor itself in our world. Everyone who comes here becomes part of the signal it's broadcasting." "Broadcasting to what?" Before she could answer, the stones beneath my feet began to vibrate with a low, resonant hum. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, and I realized it was the collective voice of everyone trapped in this basement, harmonizing in some language that predated human speech. "To its brothers," Emily said, her voice now joining the growing chorus despite her obvious struggle to resist. "There are churches like this one all over the world, William. Hidden places where the barriers are thin. And when enough people are gathered in each one, when the signal is strong enough." The humming grew louder, and I felt my own throat beginning to vibrate involuntarily. Whatever force had claimed all these people was starting to work on me too. My thoughts were becoming fuzzy, my memories of life outside the church fading like dreams upon waking. "Fight it, William!" Emily screamed, her voice cutting through the supernatural chorus. "Remember why you came here. Remember your family." "My family." Sarah's sleepy mumble when my phone rang at dawn. My daughter Jessica's soccer game tomorrow afternoon. My son Mark's upcoming college graduation. These people, these memories were real. They existed outside this nightmare, and I had to get back to them. I pulled out my cell phone, hoping against hope for a signal, and saw something that made my heart skip, a single bar of reception. With trembling fingers, I scrolled to Sarah's contact and hit voice message. "Sarah," I whispered into the phone as the supernatural chorus grew deafening around me. "I love you. I love our kids. If something happens to me, know that I tried to save a lost girl. And whatever you do, never let anyone go looking for St. Cornelius Chapel." I sent the message and felt a tiny spark of hope when the phone showed it had gone through. Somewhere out there, in the real world, my family would know what had happened to me. But Emily was right. I couldn't leave. The church's influence was too strong now, seeping into my mind like poison. I could feel my will dissolving, my sense of self becoming part of the collective consciousness that powered whatever signal this place was broadcasting. That's when I noticed something the others had missed in their despair. Emily's hiking boot was untied, and caught in the laces was a small object I recognized. A GPS emergency beacon, the kind serious hikers carry as a last resort. "Emily," I whispered, fighting to keep my individual thoughts coherent. "Your beacon. Did you activate it before this place took you?" She looked down in confusion, then her eyes widened with desperate hope. I remember pressing the button when I first walked into the church, but the signal never went out. This place blocks everything." I looked around the basement with new understanding. We were underground, surrounded by stone that could interfere with radio signals. But what if we weren't as deep as the church wanted us to believe? What if the supernatural aspects of this place were partly illusion, designed to make escape seem impossible? Fighting against the numbing influence trying to claim my mind, I stood up from the nightmare pew where I'd been unconsciously settling. The other captives turned to watch me with their ancient, knowing eyes, but Emily grabbed my hand with desperate strength. "The signal has to get out," she whispered. "If rescue teams could find this place, if the world knew what was happening here." I pulled my emergency radio from my belt, a heavy-duty unit designed to punch through interference that might stop a cell phone. The display was dark, but when I switched it to the emergency frequency, I heard something that made my heart race, the faint crackle of distant voices. "This is Unit 7, Forest Service, emergency transmission." I spoke into the radio, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I have located missing person Emily Richardson at coordinates, at the location of St. Cornelius Chapel, Pine Ridge National Forest. Multiple missing persons found. Requesting immediate backup and medical assistance." The supernatural chorus around us faltered, the harmonized humming breaking into discordant notes. For the first time since I'd entered the basement, some of the captives' faces showed expressions other than blank acceptance: confusion, hope, fear. "William," Emily's voice was changing, becoming more like the young woman her mother remembered, and less like the hollow vessel the church had made her. "I can feel it working. The signal is getting weaker." Above us, I heard something that sent chills down my spine. Footsteps on the chapel floor. Heavy, purposeful steps that seemed to multiply with each passing moment. Whatever had been pretending to be Reverend Whitmore was no longer alone. "Unit 7, this is base. William, we're receiving your transmission. GPS shows your location as... That can't be right. You're showing up as being 3 miles underground." I keyed the radio again. "Base, ignore GPS. I'm sending coordinates manually." I read off the numbers from Emily's map, praying they were accurate enough to guide a rescue team to this clearing. "Copy, Unit 7. We have multiple units responding to your location. ETA 40 minutes. 40 minutes. We just had to survive whatever was coming down those steps for 40 minutes. The footsteps above grew louder, joined by voices, not the gentle tones of Reverend Whitmore, but harsh, guttural sounds that seemed to scrape against the stone walls. The thing that had been masquerading as a long-dead priest was dropping its facade. "They're angry," Emily whispered, her grip on my hand tightening. "The church doesn't like interference. It's calling its guardians." Around us, the other captives began to stir with increasing agitation. Some were trying to stand from their stone seats. Others were clawing at their faces as if trying to remember who they'd been before this place claimed them. The supernatural harmony that had held them in thrall was breaking down. "Stay close to me," I told Emily, drawing my taser. It probably wouldn't stop whatever was coming, but it was better than facing the unknown unarmed. That's when the lights went out. Not just my flashlight, though that died too, but every source of illumination in the basement, including the strange phosphorescent glow I now realized had been emanating from the walls themselves. We were plunged into darkness so complete it felt solid, pressing against our faces like a burial shroud. In that darkness, things began to move. The sound was indescribable, like hundreds of bodies sliding across stone, accompanied by breathing that was too deep, too wet, too wrong to be human. The temperature plummeted until our breath became clouds of ice crystals, and the smell of incense was replaced by something far worse, the stench of things that should have been buried long ago. "William," Emily's voice was barely a whisper beside me. "Don't let go of my hand. Whatever happens, don't let go." I squeezed her fingers and keyed my radio one more time. "Base, this is Unit 7. If you don't hear from me again, tell the Richardson family their daughter fought like hell to come home. Unit 7, what's your status? We're 15 minutes out." Before I could respond, something grabbed my ankle. The grip was impossibly strong and cold as winter stone. I was yanked off my feet, Emily's hand torn from mine as I was dragged across the basement floor. My radio went skittering into the darkness, its display light creating brief, terrifying glimpses of shapes that my mind refused to process. I managed to twist around and activate my taser, the electrical discharge creating a brilliant blue flash that illuminated the basement for one horrible moment. What I saw branded itself into my memory forever. Dozens of figures surrounding us, but they weren't the missing persons we'd found sitting in those stone pews. These were the guardians Emily had mentioned, things that had once been human but had been changed by decades of exposure to whatever force powered this unholy place. The electrical shock loosened the grip on my ankle long enough for me to roll away and scramble back toward where I'd last heard Emily. "Emily, where are you?" "Here." Her voice came from my left, stronger now than it had been since I'd found her. "William, the other people, the ones who were sitting in the pews, they're fighting back." She was right. In the darkness, I could hear sounds of struggle, voices calling out names and memories that the church had tried to steal from them. The supernatural influence was weakening as more outside signals penetrated this place, and the captives were remembering who they were. My searching hands found Emily crouched behind one of the stone pillars, and together we listened to the chaos erupting around us. The guardians were shrieking now, sounds that might have been words in some language never meant for human throats. And from above came the sound of splintering wood as something very large forced its way down the basement stairs. "The church is collapsing," Emily whispered, and I realized she was right. The supernatural framework that had held this nightmare together was falling apart as rescue teams approached and radio signals pierced the isolation that had protected this place for decades. That's when the lights came back on. But they weren't the phosphorescent glow we'd seen before. These were harsh LED beams cutting through the darkness, accompanied by familiar voices shouting tactical commands. The rescue team had found the basement entrance. "Forest Service, this is search and rescue. William, if you can hear us, call out." I'd never heard anything more beautiful than Maria Santos's voice echoing off the stone walls. "Here, we're here. Emily's with me." What happened next still feels like a fever dream. The rescue team swept through the basement with military precision, their lights revealing that most of the guardians had simply disappeared, leaving behind only empty robes and the smell of centuries-old grave dirt. The missing persons we'd found sitting in those stone pews were dazed but alive, blinking in the harsh lights like people waking from a long sleep. EMTs wrapped Emily and me in thermal blankets as we were carried up those stone steps and out of St. Cornelius Chapel. I looked back once and saw that the building was already changing, its white walls taking on the weathered gray of genuine abandonment, its windows reflecting normal sky instead of that unnatural darkness. "How did you find us?" I asked Maria as we reached the forest clearing. She looked puzzled. "Your GPS signal came through clear as day, William. Led us right to this old ruin. Though I have to say, this place isn't on any of our maps." I turned to look at the chapel one more time, but there was nothing there except the stone foundation of a building that had obviously been abandoned for decades. No photographs, no upside-down crucifix, no evidence of the nightmare we'd just escaped. Only the trees remained as witnesses, their trunks still bearing those carved dates and names, though now the carvings looked old and weathered, like historical curiosities rather than fresh wounds. Emily squeezed my hand as we were loaded into the ambulance. "Did that really happen?" she whispered. "I don't know," I admitted. "But we're going home." The psychological evaluation team cleared both Emily and me after 2 weeks of interviews and medical tests. The official report listed our experience as severe psychological trauma resulting from extended exposure to underground fungal spores, known to cause hallucinations. The other missing persons were found to be suffering from various forms of amnesia, with no clear memories of how they'd survived in the wilderness for so long. Emily moved back in with her parents and started college the following spring. She sends me a Christmas card every year, always with the same message. Thank you for keeping your promise. I returned to active duty after a month of administrative leave, but I never went back to that section of Pine Ridge National Forest. Other rangers patrol that area now, and they've never reported anything unusual about the old church foundation or the trees with their mysterious carvings. But sometimes, on quiet nights when I'm alone in the ranger station, my radio picks up signals that don't match any known frequency. Voices speaking in Latin, harmonizing in perfect chorus, calling out to something ancient and patient that waits in the spaces between our world and whatever lies beyond. I always turn the radio off when that happens. Some signals aren't meant to be answered. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror and comment your theory about what really happened to Emily. I read every single one. The end. What did you think of William and Emily's supernatural horror story? Would you have been brave enough to enter that cursed church? My name is William, and I saw Megan for the last time 3 meters ahead of me on the trail before she simply vanished. Not vanished like people say when someone gets lost. Not vanished like when hikers wander off trail and you spend 3 days finding their body at the bottom of a ravine. Vanished like the fucking air swallowed her whole, leaving nothing but the echo of her hiking boots on wet leaves and the metallic taste of my own terror. It was 2:47 p.m. on October 15th, 2018. Coordinates 356532 Degran, 83 town 5070 Degrau W, when my world collapsed again. The autumn air in the Great Smoky Mountains carried that crisp bite that made your lungs ache, pine needles releasing their sharp scent with every step. Megan Richards, 23 years old, blonde ponytail bouncing with each stride, had been chatting about her graduate thesis on Appalachian folklore just seconds before the forest decided to claim her. My radio crackled with static as I fumbled for it with shaking fingers, the familiar weight of my duty belt suddenly feeling like 100 pounds dragging me toward hell. Base, this is Ranger 47. I have a 1054 at my location. Repeat, missing person, adult female, last seen. My voice cracked like a teenager's. Jesus Christ, she was right there. The silence that followed wasn't natural. Every ranger knows forest silence. It's thick, organic, full of tiny sounds that tell you the ecosystem is alive and breathing. This was different. This was the silence that came before something hungry showed itself. The same unnatural quiet that had preceded the Millbrook incident 3 years ago, when I found those campers arranged in ways that still visited me in my sleep. I'd been leading Megan on a routine escort to the old Cherokee settlement ruins when she'd stopped suddenly, tilting her head like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. "Did you hear that?" she'd asked, her voice carrying that particular note of curiosity that made my ranger instinct scream warnings. I'd heard nothing but wind through October leaves, but Megan was already stepping off the marked trail, drawn toward a section of forest I'd patrolled for 7 years but somehow never really noticed. "Stay on the path," I'd called, but she was young and excited, her research passion overriding common sense. 3 steps off the trail, 3 fucking steps. And then she was gone like someone had erased her with digital precision, leaving only the faint scent of something wrong, something that smelled like old thread and formaldehyde masked with honeysuckle. My GPS unit showed her last position, but when I reached those exact coordinates, there was nothing. No footprints in the soft earth, no broken branches, no disturbed leaves. Just a perfect circle of forest floor that looked somehow too neat, too arranged, like someone had swept it clean with surgical precision. The tremors started in my hands first, spreading up my arms like electricity. I recognized the signs. PTSD flashbacks triggered by supernatural encounters had become my unwelcome specialty since Millbrook. My vision tunneled, superimposing images of what I'd found in that cave 3 years ago. 5 people arranged in impossible positions, their eyes still moving, their mouths trying to form words around threads that held them in permanent, living sculptures. "Megan!" I screamed into the unnatural quiet, my voice echoing wrong, bouncing back with harmonics that didn't match the terrain. Megan. Something rustled in the underbrush 50 yards ahead, too deliberate to be natural, too rhythmic to be animal movement. It sounded like fabric being drawn through fabric, a soft whisking that made my skin crawl and my stomach clench with recognition. I'd heard that sound before in nightmares that weren't quite dreams. My cell phone showed no signal, which was normal for this elevation, but my radio was picking up something that definitely wasn't normal. A low-frequency hum that seemed to pulse with my heartbeat. Static burst from the speaker in patterns that almost sounded like Morse code, if Morse code could express screaming. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in as many seconds, my breath suddenly visible in sharp puffs that dissipated too quickly. Sweat beaded cold against my uniform collar despite the chill, and I could taste copper and fear coating my tongue like I'd bitten down on a battery. 43 minutes had passed since Megan's disappearance. In missing persons cases, the first hour is critical, but this wasn't a missing persons case anymore. This was something else wearing a missing persons case like a skin suit, and every instinct honed by 7 years of wilderness rescue and 3 years of supernatural trauma was telling me to run. Instead, I followed the whisking sound deeper into the woods, my duty weapon drawn not because bullets would help, but because the familiar weight of the Glock 22 in my grip was the only thing keeping me from complete panic. The trail, if you could call the barely perceptible path I was following a trail, led toward a section of the park I'd somehow never explored, despite hundreds of patrols through these woods. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in William's situation? Comment below. The trees grew denser as I climbed, their branches interwoven above my head like fingers locked in prayer or struggle. Spanish moss that shouldn't exist at this elevation draped from oak limbs like funeral shrouds, swaying without wind in patterns that seemed almost choreographed. The whisking sound grew stronger, joined now by something that might have been humming if humming could sound like insects trapped in amber. My boot caught on something soft, and I looked down to see a piece of fabric, purple fleece that matched Megan's hiking jacket. The material was cut with surgical precision, edges so clean they could have been made with a scalpel. There was no blood, no signs of struggle, just a perfect 3-inch square of fleece placed deliberately in my path like a breadcrumb. The humming stopped. In the absolute silence that followed, I heard something worse than any scream. The soft rhythmic sound of thread being pulled through fabric, accompanied by the barely audible whisper of someone trying to speak around an obstruction. The sounds were coming from directly ahead, where the trees opened into what looked like a natural clearing. Every nerve in my body was firing warnings, my hands shaking so violently I could barely maintain my weapon grip. The Millbrook flashbacks were coming stronger now. Memories of finding those 5 hikers arranged in their impossible positions, conscious but unable to move, their eyes tracking my movements while their bodies remained perfectly, horribly still. I should have called for backup. I should have retreated and waited for the search and rescue team. I should have done 100 things differently. But Megan's face kept superimposing itself over the faces from my nightmares, and I couldn't leave another person to the same fate I'd been too late to prevent before. The clearing opened before me like a wound in the forest, perfectly circular and carpeted with moss so uniformly green it looked artificial. Ancient oak trees formed the perimeter, their trunks bearing scars that looked like symbols carved with meticulous care. In the center of the clearing stood what I initially mistook for an art installation. It was a tapestry, a living tapestry made of human beings. 7 people, including 3 I recognized from missing persons reports spanning the last 2 years, were arranged in an intricate pattern that defied both anatomy and physics. They were connected by thousands of threads. Not rope, not wire, but actual thread in colors that ranged from midnight black to arterial red to the sick yellow of infected tissue. They were conscious. Every single one of them was awake, aware, and trying to communicate through the threads that held their mouths in fixed positions. Their eyes moved, tracked my approach with desperate intelligence, and I could see the tears cutting channels down their cheeks where terror and pain had etched permanent paths. Megan was woven into the upper right quadrant of this obscene masterpiece, her body contorted into a pose that would have been impossible for living tissue to maintain without the network of threads holding her in place. The purple fleece of her jacket was already being incorporated into the design, strips of fabric threaded through her skin with surgical precision. She was alive. Christ help me. She was alive, and looking directly at me with eyes that pleaded for death more desperately than rescue. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, spoken in a tone that suggested genuine pride in craftsmanship. I spun toward the sound, weapon raised, but saw nothing except shadows that moved independently of their sources. 7 years of work, the voice continued, and now I could place its location. It was coming from the tapestry itself, from the collective mouths of the victims whose vocal cords had been rewired to serve as a single instrument. Each piece carefully selected, precisely placed. You're just in time to witness the completion. A figure stepped from behind one of the scarred oaks, and my mind struggled to process what I was seeing. It looked human at first glance. Tall, thin, dressed in clothes that might have been fashionable in the 1800s. But its movements were wrong, too fluid, like its joints bent in directions that defied skeletal structure. Its fingers were impossibly long, ending in points that gleamed like needles, and when it smiled, I saw that its teeth had been replaced with tiny spools of thread. "William," it said, and its voice was the sound of silk being torn. "I've been waiting for you to find us. Your Megan is the final piece. But the tapestry needs one more element to achieve perfection." It gestured toward me with those needle fingers, and I felt something tugging at my uniform, pulling at the fabric with invisible hands. Threads were appearing in the air around me, materializing from nothing, and beginning to weave themselves toward my skin with predatory intent. "The ranger who finds but cannot save," the thing continued, its smile widening until its face was more thread than flesh. "Your guilt will provide the final texture, your failures the perfect counterpoint to their despair." The first thread touched my wrist, and agony exploded through my nervous system. It wasn't just physical pain, it was emotional anguish, given substance. The accumulated weight of every person I'd failed to save, concentrated into a burning line across my skin. I screamed and stumbled backward, my weapon forgotten as invisible hands began working more threads toward my exposed flesh. Megan's eyes found mine across the clearing, and I saw her mouth form a single word despite the threads holding her jaw. "Run." But I couldn't run. Not again. Not like Millbrook. Instead, I did the only thing my traumatized, desperate brain could think of. I pulled out my emergency flare and triggered it, sending a brilliant red light blazing across the clearing. The seamster shrieked, its form wavering like heat distortion as the light hit it. The threads in the air began to smoke and snap, filling the clearing with the stench of burning silk and something worse. "Light!" I gasped, understanding flooding through me as the creature retreated deeper into shadow. "You can't work in the light." I triggered my second flare, then my emergency strobe, anything that would push back the unnatural darkness. The seamster was screaming now, its carefully constructed tapestry beginning to unravel as the supernatural threads holding its victims dissolved in the harsh illumination. The 7 people collapsed to the forest floor, finally free but barely alive, their bodies bearing the permanent marks of the threads that had held them. Megan fell hard, her legs too weak to support her after hours of supernatural restraint, but she was breathing and her eyes were clear. Can't let it escape," she whispered as I reached her, her voice raw from screaming around thread. "It'll just find others." The seamster was retreating toward the tree line, its form already becoming translucent in the artificial daylight. But I remembered something from my supernatural encounters training. Some entities were bound to physical locations, anchored by objects or rituals. I looked around the clearing and saw them, 7 oak trees with carved symbols positioned in a perfect circle. The scars weren't random, they were a binding circle, keeping something contained. The seamster hadn't been hunting from this clearing. It had been imprisoned here, and somehow the missing persons had been drawn to it over the years. Understanding hit me like a physical blow. "The trees!" I shouted to Megan and anyone else who could hear. The symbols on the trees, they're a prison, not a workshop. But even as I spoke, I could see the carved symbols beginning to fade, worn away by decades of weather and the supernatural energy they'd been containing. The binding was failing, and when it finally broke, the seamster would be free to hunt beyond this clearing. My radio crackled to life with impossible clarity. All units, be advised we have a 1078 at coordinates 35.6532 degree N, 835270 degree W. Officer needs assistance immediately. It was my own voice, calling for backup I'd never requested. The seamster smiled one last time before dissolving into shadow. Until the light fails, Ranger William. Until the light fails. By the time the search and rescue team arrived, guided by GPS coordinates I'd somehow transmitted without touching my radio, I'd managed to stabilize 4 of the 7 victims. 3 didn't make it. Their bodies had been held in impossible positions for too long, their organs failing as the supernatural threads released them. Megan survived, though she spent 2 months in physical therapy, learning to use limbs that had been bound in positions no human body was designed to maintain. The scars from the threads never fully faded, forming a delicate pattern across her skin that looked almost like lace in certain light. The clearing was cordoned off as a crime scene, but investigators found nothing except 7 oak trees, with what appeared to be natural scarring. No evidence of the tapestry, no traces of the supernatural threads, nothing to support my report, except the testimony of 4 traumatized survivors whose accounts varied wildly from my own. I was placed on administrative leave pending psychological evaluation. The official report classified the incident as mass hallucination brought on by exposure to natural psychotropic compounds commonly found in certain mountain fungal species. Case closed. But I know what I saw in that clearing. I know what held those people in positions that defied human anatomy. And I know that somewhere in the vast darkness of the Great Smoky Mountains, an entity that calls itself the Seamster is waiting for the binding symbols to fade completely. Sometimes, on my mandatory days off, I hike back to those coordinates. The clearing is still there, still perfectly circular, still wrong in ways that make my skin crawl. The oak trees still bear their scars, though they're fainter now, wearing away a little more with each season. And sometimes, in the hour just before dawn when the shadows are deepest, I can hear it working again, the soft whisper of thread being pulled through fabric, the barely audible humming of something that finds joy in the careful arrangement of human despair. The light is failing, ranger by ranger, victim by victim, and I'm running out of flares. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror and comment your theory about what really happened to Megan. I read every single one.